My wife handed me a list titled, "Things You Need to Change to Marry Me." I said, "This is really helpful." Then I wrote my own list with one item on it. Find a new husband. I slid it back to her and walked out of the restaurant. You know how people say you should pay attention to red flags? Yeah, well, I apparently needed mine to be laminated and slid across a white tablecloth at Luigi's, the kind of pretentious Italian joint where they pronounce bruschetta like they personally knew Michelangelo. I should have known something was up when Clara insisted we go there for what she called an important conversation about our future. In hindsight, the woman had been planning this ambush longer than D-Day. There I was, twirling my overpriced spaghetti and thinking maybe she wanted to talk wedding venues or whether we'd hyphenate our last names. You know, normal couple stuff. Instead, Clara sits across from me looking like she's about to deliver a quarterly earnings report to disappointed shareholders. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against her wine glass, a sound that should have been my cue to run for the hills. "Daniel," she said, using that tone people reserve for talking to particularly slow children, "I've been doing some thinking about us." She reached into her designer purse, the one that cost more than my monthly car payment, and pulled out what I can only describe as the most passive-aggressive document in human history. The thing was laminated, not printed on regular paper like a normal person would do. Laminated, like she was planning to use this sucker as a placemat for years to come. The title, printed in bold Comic Sans font, which should have been red flag number 2, read, "Things You Need to Change to Marry Me." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud because surely this was some kind of elaborate joke. Maybe she'd hired a flash mob or something. But Clara just sat there, stone-faced, sipping her $15 glass of Pinot Grigio like she'd just presented the most reasonable document since the Constitution. "Go ahead," she said, gesturing toward the list like Vanna White revealing vowels. "Read it." So I read it. And with each line, I felt my soul leave my body a little more. Item 1. Increase salary by 40% within 6 months. Because apparently my current job as a decent-making project coordinator wasn't cutting it for Princess Clara's lifestyle aspirations. Item 2. Join CrossFit and achieve visible abs. I looked down at my admittedly average dad bod in training and wondered when exactly I'd signed up to become a men's health cover model. Item 3. Trade Honda Civic for BMW or equivalent luxury vehicle. My reliable, paid-off Civic that had never once left me stranded apparently wasn't good enough to chauffeur Her Royal Highness around town. Item 4. Complete wardrobe overhaul. No more graphic tees or jeans. There went my collection of vintage band shirts and the comfortable jeans that had been my faithful companions through countless pizza nights and game sessions. Item 5 really hit below the belt. Reduce contact with friends Jordan, Marcus, and Leo to once monthly maximum. These guys had been my crew since college, the ones who'd helped me move apartments, celebrated promotions with cheap beer, and never once judged me for ordering pineapple pizza. Item 6. Take golf lessons and join country club. Because nothing says, "I've lost my identity," like spending weekends in polo shirts pretending to enjoy a sport that makes watching paint dry seem exciting. Item 7 made my blood pressure spike. Limit visits to mother to holidays and special occasions only. My mom, Rosa, who worked double shifts as a nurse to raise me after my dad split when I was 8. The woman who taught me how to change a tire, balance a checkbook, and treat people with respect. Apparently, she was now a scheduling conflict. Item 8. Delete all photos with ex-girlfriends from social media and phone. Fair enough, except Clara's definition of ex-girlfriend apparently included my female cousins, co-workers, and that one picture of me with my mom's best friend at her birthday party. And the grand finale, Item 9. Purchase home in Westfield Estates or comparable upscale neighborhood within 18 months. Because my perfectly decent apartment in a normal neighborhood obviously wasn't fit for Clara's Instagram lifestyle. I sat there, staring at this monument to controlling behavior, while Clara watched me like a teacher waiting for a slow student to solve basic math. Around us, other couples were having normal conversations, arguing about whose turn it was to take out the trash or laughing about some inside joke. Meanwhile, I was getting handed a blueprint for becoming a completely different person. "Well," Clara said, swirling her wine with the confidence of someone who genuinely believed she'd just presented a reasonable request. "I think it's all very doable. I even researched some CrossFit gyms near your office. The audacity was breathtaking. This woman had literally itemized every aspect of my personality, lifestyle, and relationships that she found inadequate, laminated it for durability, and presented it like she was doing me a favor. I looked up at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. When had the woman I thought I loved become someone who saw me as a fixer-upper project? When had my friends become obstacles to be managed? When had my loving relationship with my mother become an inconvenience to be minimized? This is really helpful, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Clara's face lit up like I'd just agreed to donate a kidney. I'm so glad you're being mature about this, Daniel. I know change is hard, but that's when I pulled out my phone and started typing. One line. That's all it took. I slid the phone across the table, screen facing her. Clara's wine glass paused halfway to her lips as she read the words, "Find a new husband." The transformation on her face was like watching someone realize they'd been speaking to customer service this whole time instead of the manager. Her mouth fell open, her perfectly contoured eyebrows shot up to her hairline, and for the first time in months, I saw a genuine surprise in her eyes. "You can't be serious," she stammered. I reached into my wallet, pulled out a 20, and placed it next to my barely touched plate of overpriced pasta. "Thanks for dinner, Clara, and for showing me exactly who you really are." I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and walked toward the exit while she sat there, probably still processing that someone had actually said no to her comprehensive life makeover plan. Behind me, I could hear her calling my name, but I didn't turn around. The night air hit my face as I stepped outside, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. My Honda Civic sat in the parking lot, reliable as ever, waiting to take me home to my average apartment where I could wear my graphic tees, text my friends, and live my supposedly inadequate life in peace. As I drove away, I couldn't help but smile. Clara wanted to change everything about me, but she'd actually done me the biggest favor of all. She'd shown me that I was perfectly fine just the way I was. The drive home was weird, man. Like, really weird. You know that feeling when you're expecting your ears to pop, but they won't? That's what my brain felt like the entire 15-minute ride back to my apartment complex. My trusty Honda Civic hummed along like it always did, completely unbothered by the fact that its owner had just torpedoed a 3-year relationship with one perfectly crafted text message. I kept replaying Clara's face when she read, "Find a new husband." The woman had gone through more expressions in 5 seconds than a mime having an existential crisis. Shock, anger, disbelief. Then this weird, calculating look like she was trying to figure out if this was some kind of negotiation tactic. "Sorry, sweetheart, but when someone hands you a laminated list of ways to completely change your personality, the negotiation phase is officially over." My phone had been buzzing nonstop since I left the restaurant. Probably Clara texting me paragraphs about how I was being immature and not thinking clearly. I turned the damn thing to silent and cranked up some classic rock instead. Nothing like a little AC/DC to soundtrack your liberation from a control freak. When I pulled into my parking spot 47B, which Clara had always complained was too far from the entrance, I sat there for a minute just soaking it all in. This was my space. My decent apartment in my decent neighborhood where decent people lived their decent lives without needing approval from someone with a lamination machine and boundary issues. Walking up to my door, I felt this strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I wouldn't have to pretend to care about thread counts or wine varietals anymore. Dread because, well, Clara's stuff was everywhere in my apartment. 3 years of slowly but surely taking over my space like some kind of designer virus. I unlocked the door and was immediately hit with the scent of her overpriced vanilla candles and that perfume she wore that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The living room looked like a Pottery Barn catalog had exploded. Gone were my comfortable, mismatched furniture pieces, replaced by coordinated throw pillows that served no actual purpose except to look good on Instagram. My coffee table, which used to hold pizza boxes and Xbox controllers, was now adorned with decorative books nobody was supposed to actually read and some weird sculptural thing that looked like abstract fruit. Time for some spring cleaning. In December. Whatever. I started with the bedroom because, let's be honest, that's where the most damage had been done. My dresser, which used to house my collection of free t-shirts from various software conferences and charity runs, had been invaded by an army of skincare products that cost more than most people's rent. Serums, moisturizers, toners, eye creams. It looked like she was running a dermatology clinic out of my bedroom. I grabbed a couple of cardboard boxes from my closet and started packing. Each bottle and jar went in with a satisfying clink. The woman had more potions than a medieval alchemist. I found products I couldn't even pronounce, including something called a microneedling facial roller that looked like a medieval torture device designed for masochists with skincare routines. Next came the handbags. Oh God, the handbags. Clara collected them like some people collect stamps, except each one cost more than my car payment. Designer names I couldn't pronounce decorated every surface of my bedroom. I carefully packed each one, not because I gave a damn about their condition, but because I'm not a monster. These things were probably worth more than my savings account. The closet was a whole other level of invasion. Somehow, my modest collection of jeans, polos, and those graphic tees she hated so much had been squeezed into about 20% of the space. The rest was occupied by Clara's wardrobe, which looked like she was preparing to attend Fashion Week in Paris, a business conference in Tokyo, and a beach vacation in the Maldives all in the same week. As I was boxing up her work blazers, each one probably costing more than I spent on clothes in an entire year, I heard a knock at my door. For a split second, my heart jumped thinking it might be Clara coming to either apologize or unleash hell. Instead, I opened it to find Mrs. Ramirez, my landlord, holding a plate of what smelled like homemade tamales. Mrs. Ramirez is one of those old-school ladies who somehow knows everything that happens in the building without being nosy about it. She's probably 65, has raised 4 kids on her own, and could probably fix a leaky pipe better than most professional plumbers. "Mijo," she said, looking at the boxes scattered around my living room. "You want to tell me why you're packing up La Princessa's things?" I gave her the short version. Laminated list, unreasonable demands, mutual parting of ways. Mrs. Ramirez listened while nodding like she'd seen this movie before and knew how it ended. Daniel," she said, patting my shoulder like I was one of her own kids. "I was wondering when you'd wake up. That girl, she walks through here like she owns the place. Last week she told me your apartment needed better lighting for her selfies." "Wait, what?" She said, "What now?" She wanted me to install those fancy LED lights in every room. Said the current lighting was Instagram suicide, whatever that means. Mrs. Ramirez shook her head. I told her if she wanted to redecorate, she should get her own place. I laughed, probably for the first time in weeks. Of course, Clara had been planning to renovate my apartment without asking me. Why stop at changing my entire personality when you could also redesign my living space? "You need new locks?" Mrs. Ramirez asked, like she was offering to lend me sugar. "You know what? Yeah, I do." An hour later, Mrs. Ramirez had swapped out my locks with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Apparently, she kept spare locks in her maintenance closet specifically for situations like this. When I asked if this happened often, she just winked and said, "More than you'd think, Mijo." By the time we finished, it was getting dark outside. My phone showed 17 missed calls and about 43 text messages, but I wasn't ready to deal with that drama yet. Instead, I helped Mrs. Ramirez write out a note for the building's mailroom, Clara's belongings. "Please pick up by Sunday." "You sure you don't want to just leave them outside?" Mrs. Ramirez asked, eyeing the boxes like they contained evidence of war crimes. "Nah, I'm not trying to be petty," I said. Though honestly, the thought had crossed my mind. After Mrs. Ramirez left with promises to keep an eye out for any drama, I found myself alone in my apartment for the first time in months. It was weird how much bigger the place looked without all of Clara's stuff crowding every surface. My mismatched furniture didn't look so bad anymore. My coffee table could actually hold coffee again instead of decorative nonsense. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, one of the cheap ones Clara always wrinkled her nose at, and called my mom. "Daniel, how was dinner with Clara?" Mom's voice had that hopeful tone she used when she was trying to be supportive of a relationship she clearly had reservations about. "Well, Mom, let's just say there won't be any more dinners with Clara." Silence. Then, "Que paso, Mijo?" I told her about the list. All of it. The salary demands, the friend restrictions, the golf lessons, and especially the part about limiting visits to her. By the time I finished, Mom was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she started laughing. Not just chuckling, full-on, belly-shaking laughter that made me smile despite everything. "Ay, Dios mío," she finally managed. "Daniel, Mijo, better." She showed her true colors now than after 20 years of marriage. My mom, the woman who worked double shifts as a nurse while putting herself through school and raising me after my dad decided being a father wasn't for him, had just summed up my entire relationship in one sentence. "You okay, Mijo?" she asked, her voice gentler now. "You know what, Mom? For the first time in months, I think I actually am." After we hung up, I looked around my Clara-free apartment and cracked open another cheap beer. Tomorrow I'd have to deal with the aftermath, but tonight I was just going to enjoy the silence and the space to breathe again. Turns out, Clara wasn't the type to take silent rejection lying down. Who could have seen that coming, right? I mean, it's not like she'd just presented me with a laminated life makeover plan or anything. Clearly, this was a woman who understood the subtle art of backing off gracefully. Monday morning started normal enough. I rolled out of bed, grabbed my favorite coffee mug, the one shaped like Darth Vader's helmet that Clara had always said was childish, and made myself some actual good coffee instead of that organic, fair trade, triple-filtered nonsense she used to insist on. I was halfway through my first cup when Jordan texted me. "Dude, you're not gonna believe what happened at Luigi's last night." Oh, this should be good. Jordan works as a server at 3 different restaurants to pay for his art school loans, and Luigi's is one of his regular gigs. He'd been working Saturday night when Clara and I had our little disagreement. "After you left," Jordan's next text read, "your girl sat there for another hour. Just sitting, drinking wine and telling random people at other tables that you'd come back once you processed her feedback." I nearly choked on my coffee. Feedback. That's what we're calling manipulative control lists now. "She kept showing people the laminated thing," Jordan continued. "Even asked the couple next to her if they thought her requests were reasonable. They literally asked to be moved to another table." The mental image of Clara conducting an impromptu focus group on her relationship demands while surrounded by people just trying to enjoy their overpriced pasta was almost too much. Almost. But the real fun was just getting started. I should have known something was up when I walked into the office and Denise from reception was trying not to laugh. She kept glancing at me and then at the elevators like she was watching the world's most awkward sitcom. I figured maybe I had toothpaste on my shirt or something, so I checked myself in the bathroom mirror. Nope, just my regular face looking appropriately caffeinated for a Monday morning. I made it to the 3rd floor where our project management team has our little corner of corporate mediocrity. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped out into what can only be described as the most surreal scene of my professional career. There, standing in our lobby area with a fucking laptop and a projector screen, was Clara. She was dressed like she was about to give a TED Talk on corporate synergy, complete with a blazer that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent and those shoes that make that annoying clicking sound on tile floors. But here's the kicker. She'd set up a full PowerPoint presentation. The title slide, displayed in all its Comic Sans glory, read, "Daniel's Transformation Plan, A Path to Excellence." I stood there like an idiot, still holding my coffee, while my coworkers gathered around like they were witnessing a traffic accident. And honestly, that's pretty much what it was. "Daniel." Clara beamed at me like I'd just walked in on my own surprise party. "Perfect timing. I was just explaining to your colleagues how we're going to optimize your potential." Greg, my manager, a decent guy in his 50s who mostly just wants everyone to hit their deadlines and leave him alone, looked at me with the expression of someone who'd accidentally walked into the wrong movie theater and was trying to figure out if he should stay or leave. "Clara," I said, my voice probably a little too loud, "what the hell are you doing here?" "I'm presenting your improvement plan to your professional network," she said, like this was the most normal thing in the world. "I figured if your friends and family are going to be part of your journey, your coworkers should understand the process too." She clicked to the next slide. Salary enhancement strategies filled the screen, complete with bullet points about negotiation tactics and value proposition optimization. My face probably turned the same color as my Darth Vader coffee mug. The thing is, my coworkers aren't bad people, but they're also not saints. Sarah from accounting was literally taking pictures with her phone. Mike from IT was trying to record video. These people had front row seats to what was possibly the most humiliating moment of my professional life, and they were documenting it for posterity. As you can see, Clara continued, clicking to a slide titled Physical Improvement Timeline. Daniel will be joining CrossFit and implementing a structured nutrition plan. I've already researched gyms within a 5-mile radius of his apartment. That's when I snapped. Clara, stop. Just stop. But she was in full presentation mode now, probably imagining herself as some kind of relationship consultant guru. The wardrobe overhaul will happen in phases, she said, clicking to another slide that showed before and after photos of men in business casual attire. Starting with the elimination of graphic t-shirts and moving toward a more sophisticated aesthetic. Greg finally found his voice. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to. Oh, don't worry, Clara interrupted. This won't affect Daniel's work performance. In fact, studies show that people who dress better perform better. She gestured toward the screen like she was revealing the secrets of the universe. That's when building security showed up. Turns out, Denise from reception had been laughing because she'd already called them. Clara tried to argue that she was there as my life coach and had every right to discuss my professional development. But security wasn't having it. As they escorted her toward the elevators, Clara called out, Daniel, we'll continue this conversation later. This is just a temporary setback. The lobby fell silent except for the clicking of her expensive heels on the tile floor getting fainter as the elevator doors closed. Everyone stared at me like I was a zoo animal who'd just done something particularly entertaining. Greg shook his head and muttered, Man, is this a sitcom or real life? Both, I replied, taking a long sip of my coffee. Definitely both. The rest of the morning was a blur of coworkers stopping by my desk to ask if I was okay, and whether that was really real or some kind of elaborate prank. By lunch, someone had already made a meme out of one of Sarah's photos showing Clara pointing at her PowerPoint screen with the caption, When you need a presentation to convince someone you're not controlling. But Clara wasn't done. Oh no, she was just getting warmed up. That evening, I was heating up leftover Chinese food, the good, greasy kind that Clara always said would destroy my digestive system, when my mom called. She sounded tired, which was weird because Mom usually has more energy than a kindergarten teacher on espresso. Daniel, Mijo, we need to talk. What's wrong, Mom? Your Clara showed up here today. I nearly dropped my container of lo mein. She what? She came to my house with some man in a suit. Said he was a therapist, and they were here for an intervention for you. The audacity, the sheer, breathtaking audacity of this woman never ceased to amaze me. Mom, please tell me you didn't. Mijo, I've been dealing with difficult people since before you were born, she said, and I could hear the steel in her voice. The therapist left as soon as he realized you hadn't agreed to any of this nonsense. Apparently, Clara had hired some poor licensed counselor under the pretense that I was struggling with commitment issues and fear of personal growth. When the therapist figured out that I had no idea he was coming and hadn't consented to any kind of intervention, he packed up his briefcase and left faster than a pizza delivery guy with 5 other stops. But Clara wasn't ready to give up. After the therapist left, she spent another hour trying to convince my mom that she was enabling my mediocrity and that I needed professional guidance to reach my potential. What did you tell her? I asked. Mom was quiet for a moment. I told her that I raised you to be a good man who treats people with respect. I told her that I worked double shifts to put food on the table and put myself through school while raising you, and that calling my son mediocre was the fastest way to get thrown out of my house. And then I told her that if being average means treating people with kindness instead of trying to control them, then I'm proud to have raised an average son. My throat felt tight. Thanks, Mom. But Daniel? That girl. She blamed me for how you turned out. Said I raised you to be comfortable with mediocrity instead of pushing you to be better. The woman had gone to my mother's house, uninvited, with a fake therapist, and then had the balls to criticize how she raised me. My mom, who sacrificed everything to give me a good life and never once made me feel like I wasn't enough. I was done being polite about this situation. Clara wanted to escalate things. Game on. Tuesday through Thursday passed without any Clara-related incidents, which honestly made me more nervous than if she'd shown up dressed as a mariachi band outside my window. When someone like Clara goes quiet, it usually means they're plotting something that requires spreadsheets and possibly a small legal team. I should have trusted my instincts. Friday morning, I'm sitting at my desk trying to concentrate on a project timeline when my email notification pings. The sender name made my coffee suddenly taste like battery acid. Edward Mitchell, Clara's dad. Now, Edward and I had what you might generously call a complicated relationship. He's one of those guys who made his money in construction back when you could build a house for the price of a decent car, and he never let anyone forget it. Every conversation with him felt like a job interview where the position was worthy of his daughter, and I was perpetually underqualified. The subject line read, business opportunity. Because of course it did. Edward was incapable of having a normal human conversation. Everything had to sound like it was happening in a boardroom with leather chairs and glass tables. I clicked it open, and honestly, I should have just deleted it right there. Would have saved myself a lot of secondhand embarrassment. Daniel. It began, because Edward was too important for basic pleasantries like hi, or how are you? I hope this message finds you well and in a reflective state of mind regarding recent events. Recent events. Like I'd been involved in some kind of diplomatic incident instead of walking out on his daughter's attempt to completely overhaul my personality. After speaking with Clara about your temporary disagreement, I've been considering ways to help you both work through this rough patch. Temporary disagreement. Right. That's what we're calling. I don't want to be turned into someone else entirely. The email continued. As you know, my construction company, Mitchell & Associates, has been expanding rapidly. We're currently looking for a project coordinator with your skill set to oversee our residential development projects. Here we go. I could practically hear the string music swelling in the background as Edward prepared to make me an offer I couldn't refuse. Except, I totally could refuse it. The position would come with a starting salary of $85,000 annually, plus performance bonuses and full benefits. This represents a significant increase from your current compensation package. I did the math in my head. That was about a 42% raise from my current job, just enough to meet item number 1 on Clara's laminated list of Daniel improvements. What a coincidence. Additionally, the position would provide you with the financial stability necessary for major life decisions, such as home ownership in desirable neighborhoods and lifestyle enhancements that reflect professional success. Lifestyle enhancements. Home ownership in desirable neighborhoods. Jesus, he was practically quoting from Clara's presentation word for word. I could picture them sitting around his mahogany desk, probably with Clara's PowerPoint still up on his computer screen, strategizing how to lure me back into the fold. But wait, there's more. Edward wasn't done demonstrating just how little he understood about basic human dignity. I believe this opportunity could provide the foundation for you and Clara to rebuild your relationship on more solid ground. Professional success often translates to personal confidence and relationship satisfaction. Translation: maybe if you make more money, you'll be good enough for my daughter. The email got worse. I've taken the liberty of scheduling a preliminary interview for Monday at 2 p.m. I've also arranged for you and Clara to attend couples counseling with Dr. Patricia Henley, a highly regarded relationship specialist. The first 3 sessions would be my gift to you both. A gift. He was calling therapy a gift, like it was a fucking gift card to Olive Garden. I believe that with proper guidance and the right professional opportunities, you and Clara can work through your current challenges and build the future you both deserve. The future we both deserve. Not the future I wanted, not the future that made me happy. The future that met his and Clara's definition of acceptable. But here's the kicker, the part that really showed me just how little these people thought of me as an actual human being with thoughts and feelings. I've CC'd Clara on this email, as I believe transparency is crucial for rebuilding trust and communication. He'd CC'd her on an email offering me a job contingent on getting back together with his daughter, like I was some kind of business asset they were negotiating over. I scrolled down to see Clara's email address right there in the CC line, which meant she'd gotten this exact same email at the exact same time I did. She probably knew about this business opportunity before I did. Hell, she probably helped write it. I sat there staring at my computer screen, feeling this weird mix of rage and disbelief. These people really thought they could just buy me, like I was some kind of mercenary whose principles could be purchased with a salary bump and free therapy sessions. The worst part was that Edward probably genuinely believed he was being generous. In his mind, he was offering me a chance to level up and become worthy of his precious daughter. He couldn't comprehend that maybe, just maybe, I didn't want to be worthy of someone who saw me as a project to be managed. I imagined him dictating this email to his secretary, probably gesturing with his hands and talking about win-win scenarios and strategic partnerships. To him, this wasn't about love or relationships or basic human respect. This was a business deal. Daniel 2.0 in exchange for one Clara Mitchell, slightly used but willing to negotiate terms. My phone buzzed with a text from Clara. Did you see Dad's email? This is exactly what we need to move forward. The counselor he found has amazing reviews on Psychology Today. Another text followed immediately. I know you're probably feeling overwhelmed by all the opportunities, but this is our chance to build something really special together. Opportunities. That's what she called her father trying to bribe me back into a relationship where I'd have to fundamentally change everything about myself. I looked around my office, at my coworkers going about their normal days, dealing with normal problems like project deadlines and printer malfunctions. None of them had to deal with potential in-laws who treated relationships like corporate mergers. Greg walked by my desk carrying his third cup of coffee of the day. You look like someone just told you Christmas was canceled, he said. Something like that, I replied. The thing about Edward's offer was that it wasn't entirely terrible from a purely financial standpoint. 85 grand was serious money, and the benefits package probably included dental and one of those fancy health savings accounts. 3 years ago, before I knew what Clara was really like, I might have been tempted. But now all I could see was the strings attached, the expectations, the implied ownership. Take this job, and I'd be forever indebted to the Mitchell family. Every project I worked on, every interaction with Edward, would come with the unspoken understanding that I was there because I'd agreed to be the right kind of boyfriend for his daughter. I'd be trapped in a job where my personal life was literally part of my employment agreement, where my relationship status was tied to my professional performance, where Edward could hold my career hostage anytime Clara and I had a disagreement. And what happened when Clara decided she wanted to upgrade me further? When she came up with new lists of improvements and life changes, Edward would be right there, ready with another opportunity that came with more strings attached. I thought about my mom working double shifts to keep us afloat when I was growing up. She never had anyone offering her cushy jobs or strategic partnerships. She just worked her ass off and raised a kid who knew the difference between genuine opportunity and manipulative bullshit. My current job wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I'd earned it, and I could leave it whenever I wanted without having to explain my personal life to anyone. I closed Edward's email without responding. Some offers aren't actually offers. They're just elaborate ways of showing you exactly how little someone thinks of your autonomy. Clara could keep her dad's money and her therapy sessions and her vision of our special future together. I had work to do. Sunday, the day of reckoning. Clara's deadline to pick up her stuff, which I generously set after Mrs. Ramirez and I posted that note in the mailroom. You'd think after a week of radio silence from my end, ignoring her calls, texts, and her dad's corporate bribery attempt, she'd have gotten the message. But no, Clara Morrison was apparently the kind of person who viewed deadlines as suggestions and boundaries as merely the opening position in a negotiation. I was planning to spend the morning doing absolutely nothing productive. Maybe catch up on some Netflix, order pizza for breakfast like the gloriously average person I apparently was, and enjoy the peace and quiet of my Clara-free apartment. The boxes of her belongings were stacked neatly by the door, labeled and ready to go. I'd even thrown in some bubble wrap because, despite everything, I wasn't trying to be a complete asshole. Around 10:30, I was deep into an episode of The Office, the one where Jim puts Dwight's stapler in Jell-O, which felt oddly appropriate, when I heard the rumble of a large truck outside. Not unusual for a Sunday morning. People move on weekends, delivery trucks make their rounds, life goes on. Then I heard voices, multiple voices, and the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the stairs leading to my floor. I paused Michael Scott mid-sentence and listened. Heavy footsteps, like people carrying stuff. Maybe Mrs. Ramirez was having some maintenance work done, or new neighbors were moving in. But something about the rhythm of those footsteps made my spidey senses tingle. Then came the knock. Not Clara's usual rapid-fire, impatient knock, but a heavy, businesslike pounding that shook my door frame. I looked through the peephole and nearly choked on my coffee. Standing in my hallway were 3 guys who looked like they could bench press my Honda Civic, and behind them was Tasha, Clara's friend from college. They were all wearing matching t-shirts that said Morrison Moving Services in bright blue letters. Morrison, as in Edward Morrison, as in Clara's dad had hired professional movers to collect her stuff. Because apparently even picking up her own belongings required a coordinated business operation in the Morrison family. I opened the door, and the biggest guy, a mountain of a man who looked like he ate protein bars for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, smiled at me with the practiced friendliness of someone who dealt with awkward situations for a living. "You Daniel?" he asked, consulting a clipboard like he was delivering a court summons. "That's me." "Great. We're here to pick up Clara Morrison's belongings. Should be pretty straightforward. We've got a list of everything." He handed me a piece of paper, and I swear to God, it looked like an inventory for a small department store. Clara had provided these guys with a detailed manifest of every single item she wanted them to take. And as I read through it, my blood pressure started climbing faster than a SpaceX rocket. Sure, her clothes were on there. Her handbags, her skincare arsenal, her decorative pillows, all legitimate. But then the list got creative. 65-inch Samsung Smart TV, living room. That was my TV. The one I'd saved up 3 months to buy. PlayStation 5 with accessories. My PS5. The gaming console I'd waited in line for 4 hours to get on launch day. Nespresso coffee machine, kitchen counter. The coffee maker I'd bought myself for my birthday last year. China set. Vintage, 12-place settings. My grandmother's china. The set she'd given me when I moved out on my own, with the little blue flowers around the edges that reminded me of her kitchen. "Guys," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "I think there's been some confusion." Tasha stepped forward, and I could see she was trying to avoid making eye contact. "Daniel, Clara said you were going through some things. She thought it would be easier if you didn't have to see her today." How thoughtful. Clara was so concerned about my emotional well-being that she decided to steal half my possessions to spare me the trauma of having to look at her. She also said. Tasha paused, clearly uncomfortable with whatever she was about to say. "She said you might try to keep some of her things out of spite, so we should just take everything on the list to be safe." One of the movers, a younger guy with arms like tree trunks, was already eyeing my TV. "Where do you want us to start, boss?" he asked Tasha. "Hold up," I said, stepping into my doorway to block their path. "That list is wrong. Like, seriously wrong. Most of that stuff is mine." The head mover looked confused, checking his clipboard again. "Ma'am, we've got written authorization here to remove all items listed. Says here these are disputed belongings from a dissolved relationship." Disputed belongings. Clara had actually told these people that my stuff was disputed. Like my PlayStation was some kind of contested territory in a messy divorce settlement. "Look," I said, addressing the head mover directly, "I don't know what she told you, but that TV is mine. I've got the receipt. Same with the gaming console and the coffee machine. The only things that belong to her are in those boxes by the door." Tasha finally looked at me, and I could see something in her expression that looked almost like guilt. "Daniel," she said you were being abusive, that you were trying to keep her stuff to hurt her." The words hit me like a slap. Abusive. Clara had actually told people I was abusive. Me, the guy who'd never raised his voice at her, never touched her in anger, never done anything worse than occasionally leave dishes in the sink overnight. Abusive. I repeated, probably louder than I meant to. "Lady, your friend tried to change every aspect of my personality with a laminated list and then showed up at my workplace with a PowerPoint presentation. If anyone's being abusive here, it's not me." The movers were looking increasingly uncomfortable, like they'd signed up to move furniture and instead found themselves in the middle of a domestic drama. The head guy was checking his phone, probably wondering if this gig was worth whatever Morrison Construction was paying them. "Ma'am," he said to Tasha, "if there's a dispute about ownership, we really can't just take stuff. We could get in trouble." "But Clara said," Tasha started. "I don't care what Clara said," I interrupted. "Half that list is my property, and you're not taking it." That's when things got interesting. Tasha pulled out her phone and started typing furiously, probably texting Clara for guidance on how to handle this unexpected resistance to their grand theft plan. The movers stood around looking like they'd rather be anywhere else, while I went back inside to grab the receipts for my TV and PlayStation. When I came back with a folder full of purchase documentation, the head mover looked relieved. "Sir, if you've got proof of purchase, we definitely can't take these items. Company policy." Tasha was still texting, her thumbs moving like she was writing a novel. Then her phone rang, and she answered it with a sharp what. I could hear Clara's voice through the phone, high-pitched and angry, but couldn't make out the words. Tasha's face went through several expressions: confusion, embarrassment, and finally something that looked like understanding. She hung up and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Daniel, I think there's been a misunderstanding. You think? Clara told us you guys had moved in together and that this stuff was jointly purchased. Tasha gestured vaguely at my apartment. She said you were trying to keep everything out of spite. The younger mover shook his head. Man, you seem pretty chill to me. This whole thing feels weird. That's when it hit me. Clara hadn't just lied to get her stuff back. She'd lied to make me look like the bad guy, to paint herself as the victim of an abusive relationship instead of the controlling girlfriend who'd driven away a decent man with her ridiculous demands. Look, I said to Tasha, I don't know what Clara told you, but here's the truth. She gave me a list of ways she wanted me to change myself to earn the right to marry her. When I said no, she's been escalating ever since. PowerPoint presentations at my job, fake therapy sessions at my mom's house, and now this. Tasha stared at me for a long moment, then looked down at her phone. She really did all that. Ask anyone at my office. They've got pictures. The head mover cleared his throat. So, what exactly are we taking here? I pointed to the boxes by my door. Those boxes contain her actual belongings. Everything else stays here. It took them maybe 20 minutes to load Clara's actual stuff into their truck. The movers were polite and professional, though I caught them exchanging glances that suggested they'd figured out who the real problem was in this situation. As they were finishing up, Tasha lingered in my doorway. Daniel, I'm sorry about all this. Clara's been my friend since college, but lately she's been. She trailed off, searching for the right words. Completely nuts? I suggested. Tasha almost smiled. I was going to say intense, but yeah. She's changed a lot in the past few years. Always trying to optimize everything, control every situation. She paused. For what it's worth, I don't think you're abusive. You seem like a decent guy who just wanted to be left alone. After they left, I sat on my couch, which was still safely in my possession, and realized that Clara had crossed a line I didn't even know existed. It was one thing to be controlling and manipulative in private, but to lie to people about me being abusive? That was character assassination, plain and simple. My phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. Saw a Morrison moving truck at your place. Everything okay? I typed back. Clara tried to steal my TV. Long story. She what? Yeah, Clara Morrison was definitely not done with me yet. But at least now I knew exactly what kind of person I was dealing with. Turns out, having your belongings almost stolen by professional movers was just Clara's warm-up act. The main event came 3 days later when she decided to rebrand herself as some kind of relationship guru and drag our entire breakup into the digital spotlight. Because nothing says mature adult handling rejection well, like turning your failed relationship into content for LinkedIn. I found out about it the way most people discover their lives have been turned into internet drama, through a concerned friend forwarding me screenshots with messages like, "Dude, you need to see this shit." Marcus was the first to send me the link Wednesday morning, along with a text that just said, "Your ex has lost her damn mind." I was eating cereal and watching SportsCenter, living my best average guy life, when I clicked on Clara's LinkedIn profile and nearly choked on my Cheerios. She'd completely overhauled her professional image overnight. Gone was marketing coordinator at Zenith Digital Solutions. Now she was apparently a life coach and relationship consultant with a tagline that read, "Helping ambitious individuals achieve their full potential in love and career." A life coach. Clara Morrison, the woman who needed a laminated list to communicate basic relationship concerns, was now presenting herself as qualified to guide other people through their personal development journeys. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But that wasn't even the best part. Oh no, Clara had written what she probably thought was a thoughtful, inspirational article titled, "When You Outgrow Your Partner, A Guide to Upward Dating." The subtitle alone made my eye twitch, recognizing when it's time to level up in love. I clicked on the article with the same morbid curiosity that makes people slow down to look at car accidents. The opening paragraph was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive storytelling. Recently, I found myself in a relationship that had reached its natural conclusion. Despite my best efforts to encourage growth and positive change, I realized that some people are simply committed to mediocrity. This isn't a judgment. We all have different comfort zones, but it's important to recognize when your partner's lack of ambition is holding back your own potential. Lack of ambition. Right. Because not wanting to completely reinvent my personality to meet someone else's checklist apparently made me the lazy one in this relationship. She went on to describe the warning signs of a partner who wasn't growth-minded. These included resistance to constructive feedback, aka not wanting to follow laminated instructions, attachment to low-value friendships, my friends Jordan, Marcus, and Leo, and financial complacency, being satisfied with my current salary. The article read like a how-to guide for identifying and disposing of average boyfriends, with just enough vague language to maintain plausible deniability while making it crystal clear she was talking about our relationship. She even included a section about the importance of setting clear expectations and creating accountability structures for personal development. Accountability structures. She was literally describing her laminated list as a professional coaching technique. But here's where Clara made her fatal mistake. She underestimated the internet's ability to smell bullshit from a mile away. The comments section was already filling up, and they were not kind. This sounds like someone trying to justify being controlling, wrote one person. Upward dating? Is this satire? Asked another. Imagine getting a life coaching certification and your first case study is your own failed relationship, commented someone with way too much time and exactly the right amount of sass. But the real fireworks started when someone, I'm guessing Marcus, though he never admitted it, shared a screenshot of Clara's actual laminated list in the comments. The same list she'd slid across the table at Luigi's, now immortalized for all of LinkedIn to see. The response was swift and brutal. People started sharing their own screenshots of the article with commentary that ranged from amused disbelief to outright roasting. Someone created a meme using one of those distracted boyfriend templates, with the boyfriend labeled normal relationship, the girlfriend labeled being yourself, and the other woman labeled Clara's laminated list. Within hours, #laminated list was trending on Twitter. People were making jokes about needing prior approval from their partners before making any life decisions. Someone started a parody account called Relationship Optimization Consultant that posted ridiculous improvement lists for celebrities. The internet had turned Clara's attempt at professional rebranding into a cautionary tale about controlling behavior in relationships. And the beautiful part? She'd done it all to herself. I was actually starting to feel a little bad for her, until Jordan called me around lunchtime. Dude, have you seen the update to her article? There's an update? She doubled down. Hard. I refreshed the page, and sure enough, Clara had added an editor's note at the bottom. Update. It appears some individuals have chosen to weaponize private relationship materials for public ridicule rather than engaging in constructive dialogue about personal growth. This only reinforces my point about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who support your journey toward excellence. She was actually trying to spin the backlash as proof that she was right. The woman was getting roasted by the entire internet for being controlling, and her response was essentially, "This just proves my point about toxic people." But that wasn't all. She'd also added a new section to the article about dealing with resistance from your social circle when pursuing personal development. It included a paragraph about how friends and family members who mock your efforts to improve are often projecting their own insecurities about their lack of growth. She was talking about my friends and my mom. The woman was actually doubling down and throwing shade at my entire support system in a public LinkedIn article. That evening, the guys came over for our usual Wednesday night gaming session. We've been doing this for years, ordering pizza, playing whatever multiplayer game was hot, talking trash, and generally being the kind of low-value friends Clara had wanted me to eliminate from my life. So, Leo said, controller in hand as we waited for the next match to load. Your ex-girlfriend is apparently qualified to give people life advice now. According to LinkedIn, yeah, I replied, stealing a slice of pepperoni pizza. Apparently dating me was her practicum for her life coaching certification. The comments on that article are gold, Marcus added. Someone found her college Facebook photos and she's literally wearing a mediocrity is my middle name t-shirt from some college party. Jordan laughed so hard he nearly dropped his controller. Please tell me someone screenshotted that. Oh, it's been screenshotted, memed, and turned into a Pinterest inspiration board, Leo confirmed. The internet is undefeated when it comes to exposing hypocrites. We played until almost midnight, and I realized something that Clara would probably find terrifying. I was genuinely happy. Not fake happy, not making the best of things happy, but actually content with my life. My friends were hilarious and supportive. My job was decent and paid the bills. My apartment was comfortable and entirely mine. My mom loved me unconditionally. Clara had tried to convince the world that I was the problem in our relationship, that my satisfaction with a normal, happy life was somehow a character flaw that needed correcting. Instead, she'd accidentally proven that she was the one with issues. By Thursday morning, Clara had deleted the article entirely. But the internet is forever, and screenshots of her professional insights were still circulating on social media. Someone had even created a LinkedIn parody account called Corporate Clara that posted business-speak translations of common relationship problems. When your partner exhibits resistance to optimization initiatives, instead of when your boyfriend won't follow your ridiculous list. Implementing strategic friend auditing protocols, instead of demanding he cut ties with people I don't like. Facilitating maternal relationship boundary management, instead of telling him to see his mom less. The account had gained 3,000 followers in 2 days. Clara's attempt to control the narrative had backfired spectacularly. Instead of positioning herself as the mature, growth-oriented partner who'd outgrown her mediocre boyfriend, she'd become the internet's poster child for controlling behavior in relationships. But knowing Clara, this public humiliation probably just meant she was going to try something even more dramatic next. Because if there's one thing I'd learned about my ex-girlfriend, it's that she treated rejection like a puzzle to be solved rather than an answer to be accepted. And I had a feeling her next move was going to be her most unhinged yet. I should have known Clara's internet humiliation was just going to make her more creative, not less crazy. The woman had just gotten roasted by the entire LinkedIn community for trying to turn our breakup into a professional development seminar, and instead of taking the hint that maybe she should back off, she apparently decided to escalate to full-blown identity theft. The first sign something was wrong came on Friday evening when Mrs. Ramirez knocked on my door with a confused expression and a plate of her homemade empanadas. "Daniel, Mijo," she said, looking genuinely puzzled. "There's a woman downstairs asking for apartment 47B. Says she has a date with you tonight." I nearly dropped the empanada I was reaching for. "Eh, what now?" "Pretty girl, red dress. Looks like she's going somewhere fancy." She seemed surprised when I told her I'd never seen her before. Mrs. Ramirez peered at me over her glasses. "You didn't tell me you were dating again." "Dating again?" "Right. Because apparently I was dating again, according to someone who definitely wasn't me." I threw on some shoes and headed downstairs, still wearing the sweatpants and old college t-shirt that constituted my standard Friday night uniform. In the lobby stood a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Red cocktail dress, heels that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and a level of makeup artistry that suggested she'd been preparing for this date for hours. She took one look at me, and her perfectly contoured face shifted from excited anticipation to complete confusion. "You're Daniel, right?" she asked, her voice carrying just a hint of what sounded like impending disappointment. "That's me. And you are?" "Sophie. We've been texting for 3 weeks." She pulled out her phone and showed me a dating app conversation. "You said to meet you at your apartment for drinks before we went to that new rooftop bar downtown." I stared at the phone screen, and my blood pressure started climbing faster than a rocket launch. There, under a profile labeled Daniel M. 34, were pictures of me. Recent pictures. Pictures I definitely hadn't uploaded to any dating app, because I wasn't on any dating apps. But this wasn't just any fake profile. This was Clara's version of me, Daniel 2.0, the upgraded model she'd been trying to create with her laminated list. The bio read, "MBA candidate and fitness enthusiast looking for someone who shares my passion for personal growth and fine dining. Recently relocated to a beautiful home in Westfield Estates. Love staying active with CrossFit and golf, exploring new restaurants, and building meaningful connections. No games, no drama. Just looking for someone ready to build something real. MBA candidate. CrossFit. Golf. Westfield Estates. Every single item from her original list had been transformed into attractive dating profile content. Clara had literally created the man she wanted me to become and was using my photos to catfish women on my behalf. Oh shit, I muttered, scrolling through weeks of conversations where fake me had been charming, sophisticated, and apparently very interested in Sophie's career in marketing analytics. Sophie's expression was rapidly shifting from confusion to anger. What exactly is going on here? Are you catfishing me? No, absolutely not, I said quickly. I think my ex-girlfriend created this profile. I had no idea this existed. Your ex-girlfriend? Sophie's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose toward her hairline. Your ex-girlfriend has been pretending to be you for 3 weeks. Put like that, it sounded even more insane than it actually was. Which was saying something, considering how insane it actually was. Look, I know how this sounds, but do you really live in Westfield Estates? Sophie interrupted, looking around at my decidedly non-upscale apartment complex. Nope. Regular apartment, regular neighborhood. MBA candidate. Project coordinator with a bachelor's degree I finished 5 years ago. CrossFit enthusiast? I gestured to my sweatpants and the empanada crumbs on my t-shirt. I think my fitness routine speaks for itself. Sophie stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see her mental gears turning as she processed the full scope of what had happened to her. Then, unexpectedly, she started laughing. Not just a polite chuckle, but full-on, tears in her eyes laughter that echoed off the lobby walls. I'm sorry, she gasped between laughs. It's just, this is the most elaborate catfish I've ever encountered. Your ex-girlfriend created an entire fictional version of you, and then, what? Hoped you'd just go along with it when dates showed up at your door? I honestly don't know what her endgame was, I admitted. Clara's been escalating her crazy for weeks now. This is just the latest installment. Sophie wiped her eyes, careful not to smudge her makeup. Clara, let me guess. Blonde, about yay tall, talks like she's giving a TED Talk. I blinked. You know her? She messaged me on Instagram yesterday asking if I was excited about my date with Daniel and whether I thought we were compatible long-term. I thought it was weird that your friend was so invested, but now. Sophie shook her head. Now it makes perfect sense. So Clara hadn't just been catfishing women on my behalf. She'd been conducting follow-up research to see how her fake version of me was performing in the dating market. The woman had turned my love life into a social experiment. I should probably go, Sophie said, looking down at her dress. This is a lot. Wait, I said, surprised by my own words. I know this whole situation is insane, but you got all dressed up and came out here expecting dinner. The least I can do is feed you. Sophie looked skeptical. You're asking me to stay? After your psycho ex-girlfriend has been pretending to be you for weeks. I'm asking if you want to order Chinese food and hear the full story of how my 3-year relationship turned into whatever this is, I said. Fair warning though, I'm exactly as average as I appear to be. No MBA, no CrossFit membership, and definitely no house in Westfield Estates. Sophie considered this for a moment, then kicked off her heels. You know what? Fuck it. I took an Uber here. I'm dressed up with nowhere to go, and I haven't eaten since lunch. But I'm picking the restaurant, and you're paying since technically you stood me up. Deal. We ended up at Golden Dragon, the Chinese place 2 blocks from my apartment where the owners know my regular order and the decor hasn't been updated since 1987. Sophie looked hilariously overdressed sitting across from me in a booth with duct-taped seats, but she dove into the lo mein like she hadn't eaten in days. So let me get this straight, she said, wielding chopsticks with impressive precision. Your ex-girlfriend gave you a literal list of ways to change yourself, and when you said no, she's been systematically trying to force you back together through increasingly unhinged schemes. That's actually a pretty accurate summary, yeah. And instead of just moving on like a normal person, she decided to create a fake version of you that meets all her criteria and see if she could get you dates with women who'd be attracted to that version. Apparently, Sophie shook her head. That's either the most controlling thing I've ever heard, or the most elaborate psychological experiment ever conducted. Why not both? We talked for 2 hours. Sophie told me about her job, her disastrous dating history, and her theory that Clara was probably planning to use the fake dating profile as evidence that I could be more successful if I just followed her improvement plan. I told her about the PowerPoint presentation, the fake therapy session, and the attempted furniture theft. Your life is like a really weird sitcom, Sophie observed, stealing one of my spring rolls. Yeah, well, at least it's never boring. As we were finishing dinner, Sophie's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and started laughing again. What? It's from Clara. She's asking how our date went and whether I think you have husband potential. I put my head in my hands. She's monitoring the dates she set up for her fake version of me. Want to really mess with her? Sophie asked, a mischievous glint in her eye. What did you have in mind? Sophie typed something on her phone, then showed me the message she'd sent to Clara. Daniel is amazing. So much better than his profile made him seem. Already planning our second date, face-blowing a kiss. My phone buzzed almost immediately. A text from Clara. We need to talk. Now. Sophie grinned. I think I just lit a fire under your psycho ex. You realize this means she's probably going to show up at my apartment in the next hour? Good, Sophie said, fishing a pen out of her purse and writing her number on a napkin. I want to meet the woman who thinks identity theft is a valid dating strategy. She left me with her real phone number, a story that would entertain my friends for years, and the growing realization that Clara's schemes were somehow backfiring in the most spectacular ways possible. Clara had tried to humiliate me by creating a fake version of myself that would attract women, then setting up dates I couldn't possibly live up to. Instead, she'd accidentally introduced me to someone who actually liked the real me, sweatpants, average apartment, and all. My phone was buzzing with increasingly frantic texts from Clara, but for the first time in weeks, I was actually looking forward to whatever insane thing she tried next. You know how people say, just when you think things can't get any weirder? Yeah. Well, those people have clearly never dealt with Clara Morrison's particular brand of unhinged post-breakup behavior. Because just when I thought fake dating profiles were the peak of her creativity, she decided to introduce billing into the equation. The first sign that Clara had reached a new level of crazy came Tuesday morning when my mom called me at work. Now, my mom usually texts during business hours because she knows I'm busy, so a phone call immediately put me on high alert. Daniel, Mijo, you need to come over here after work, she said, and there was something in her voice I couldn't quite place. Not upset, exactly, but definitely amused. Everything okay, Mom? Oh, everything's fine. But your Clara sent me something in the mail that you need to see to believe. My Clara. Mom had been calling her your Clara with increasing sarcasm since the whole laminated list incident. But this time, there was something almost gleeful in her voice. What kind of something? The kind that made me laugh so hard I nearly spilled my coffee all over the kitchen table. Just come over after work, okay? And maybe bring some wine. We're going to need it. I spent the rest of the day distracted, wondering what fresh hell Clara had unleashed now. My coworkers were still occasionally bringing up the PowerPoint incident, and someone had printed out screenshots of her deleted LinkedIn article and taped them to the break room wall like some kind of motivational poster. Greg had started using upward dating as corporate buzzword bingo, which was hilarious until you remembered that this was my actual life. I stopped by the grocery store on my way to Mom's house and grabbed a bottle of the cheap wine she actually likes. Not the organic, sulfite-free nonsense Clara used to insist was better for your cellular health, or whatever. Just regular wine that tastes good and doesn't require a second mortgage. Mom's house is a small two-bedroom in a neighborhood that Clara always described as quaint, which was her polite way of saying not good enough for Instagram photos. But it's where I grew up, where Mom worked double shifts to keep the lights on and somehow still managed to help me with homework every night. It's home in a way that Clara's Pinterest-worthy apartment never was. I found Mom in the kitchen, sitting at the same dinette set we'd had since I was 12, with a manila envelope in front of her and the biggest smile I'd seen on her face in months. Okay, I said, setting the wine on the counter. What did she do now? Mom slid the envelope across the table like she was dealing cards at Vegas. Open it. Inside was what appeared to be an official invoice, printed on professional letterhead that read Morrison Life Optimization Services at the top. Below that, in smaller text, it said Comprehensive Personal Development Solutions. Life Optimization Services. Clara had apparently started her own business. Or at least, she'd made official-looking paperwork for her own business. The invoice was addressed to Rosa Hernandez and dated 3 days ago. The subject line read, Services rendered, Daniel Hernandez Personal Development Program. And then came the line items. Sweet Jesus, the line items. Relationship coaching, 156 hours at $75 per hour, $11,700. Meal planning and nutritional guidance, 78 sessions at $50 per session, $3,900. Career counseling and professional development, 45 sessions at $85 per session, $3,825. Social circle optimization consulting, 23 sessions at $60 per session, $1,380. Wardrobe and style consultation, 15 sessions at $120 per session, $1,800. Home environment enhancement, 8 sessions at $200 per session, $1,600. The total, printed in bold at the bottom, was $24,205. $24,000. Clara was billing my mother $24,000 for 3 years of unsolicited life coaching services. I stared at the paper, then looked up at Mom, who was watching my reaction with the expression of someone enjoying a particularly good comedy show. She's billing you, I said slowly, for dating me. Apparently, Mijo. And look at the payment terms at the bottom. I flipped the page and found a section titled Payment Terms and Conditions that read like it had been copied from a corporate collections agency. Payment is due within 30 days of invoice date. A 2.5% monthly service charge will be applied to overdue balances. Morrison Life Optimization Services reserves the right to pursue legal action for unpaid balances exceeding 60 days past due. All services were provided in good faith with the expectation of creating lasting positive change in the client's personal and professional trajectory. There was also a note at the bottom. Please remit payment to Clara Morrison, Morrison Life Optimization Services, 1247, Westfield Estates Drive, Unit 204. Westfield Estates. The neighborhood she'd wanted me to buy a house in. Apparently, Clara had moved there herself, probably with Daddy's money, and was now running her life optimization business out of her fancy apartment. Mom, I said, please tell me you're not actually considering paying this. Mom's smile got even wider. Oh, Mijo, I already responded. She handed me another piece of paper, a handwritten note on her personal stationery with the little flowers around the border. Dear Clara, it read in Mom's neat handwriting. Thank you for your invoice dated November 15th. However, I must decline payment for the following reasons. 1. I did not request any services from Morrison Life Optimization Services. 2. My son Daniel did not request any services from Morrison Life Optimization Services. 3. The services described appear to be standard relationship activities that most people provide free of charge to their romantic partners. 4. Billing someone's mother for dating their child is not a recognized business practice in any industry. 5. Your optimization services appear to have been rejected by the intended recipient, suggesting they were not effective or desired. If you continue to send invoices for unrequested services, I will be happy to bill you $300 per hour for the time spent reading and responding to your correspondence. Sincerely, Rosa Hernandez, RN. P.S. Daniel is perfect exactly as he is. I looked up at Mom, who was now openly grinning. You sent this. Mailed it yesterday. Certified mail, signature required. Mom, you're my hero. I'm not done yet, she said, pulling out her phone. I also left her a voicemail. She played the message on speaker. Hello, Clara. This is Rosa Hernandez. I received your invoice for $24,000, which I found quite amusing. Let me be very clear. If you ever send me another piece of nonsense like this, I will bill you $300 an hour for reading it. I've been a registered nurse for 30 years, which means I'm actually qualified to charge professional rates for my time, unlike someone who just invented a life coaching business to justify controlling behavior. Have a blessed day. I was laughing so hard I nearly fell off my chair. My mom, the woman who raised me to be polite and respectful to everyone, had just delivered the most perfectly crafted professional insult I'd ever heard. She called back. Mom continued, clearly enjoying herself. Left 3 voicemails, actually. Want to hear them? The first message was Clara trying to explain that the invoice was legitimate compensation for professional services rendered, and that Mom was failing to understand the value proposition of comprehensive personal development. The second message was Clara getting increasingly agitated, claiming that she had invested significant time and energy in Daniel's growth trajectory and deserved fair compensation for professional-grade consulting services. The third message was just Clara yelling about how my family doesn't appreciate quality and how I was lucky someone cared enough to try to improve me. Sounds like she's really handling this whole breakup well, I observed. Oh, but wait, Mom said. There's more. She pulled out her phone and showed me a Facebook message from Maya, Clara's sister. Daniel, I am so sorry. Clara showed me a copy of the invoice she sent your mom, and I can't even. This is not normal behavior. She did something similar to her last boyfriend, Jake, about 2 years ago. He had to get a restraining order. I thought she'd learned from that, but apparently not. Please know that the rest of our family thinks this is completely inappropriate. Clara had done this before, to another guy, and it had escalated to the point where he needed legal protection from her. Maya says Clara's been telling people you're refusing to pay for services rendered and that you're financially abusing her. Mom continued, scrolling through the message. Financial abuse. Clara was now claiming that not paying her fake invoice for dating services constituted financial abuse. We opened the wine and spent the next 2 hours going through every ridiculous detail of Clara's invoice. She'd itemized everything from cooking dinner together, nutritional consulting, to helping me pick out clothes for my cousin's wedding, style consultation, to having conversations about my job, career counseling. According to Clara's math, every aspect of our relationship had been a billable professional service, and she'd been keeping track of hours like she was running a consulting firm instead of, dating someone. You know what the saddest part is? I said, refilling our wine glasses. What's that, Mijo? She actually thinks this is reasonable. She's convinced herself that being a girlfriend was a job, and that breaking up means I owe her severance pay. Mom shook her head. That girl has some serious problems, Daniel. And I'm glad you figured that out before you married her. As I drove home that night, slightly wine-buzzed and definitely entertained, I realized that Clara's invoice was actually a gift. Not because I was planning to pay it. Hell no. But because it was such a perfectly insane document that it would be impossible for anyone to take her seriously ever again. Clara had just provided written evidence of exactly how unhinged she'd become. And knowing my mom, she'd probably already made copies to show to her friends at the hospital, who would spread the story to their friends, who would make sure everyone in town knew about the woman who tried to bill someone's mother for dating their son. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. How was your day? Any new Clara drama? I sent back a photo of the invoice. She's billing my mom for dating me. Sophie's response was immediate. What the actual F***CK? Yeah, that pretty much summed it up. Hashtag Chapter 9, The Wedding Crash. If there's one thing I've learned about Clara Morrison over the past few weeks of her escalating insanity, it's that she has a talent for turning other people's special moments into her own personal drama theater. So when my cousin Lucia's wedding rolled around on Saturday, I should have known better than to assume Clara would respect the basic human decency of leaving someone else's wedding alone. Lucia had been planning this wedding for 2 years. She's one of those people who color codes everything and has backup plans for her backup plans. Every detail had been meticulously arranged, from the flowers to the seating chart to the specific shade of ivory for the tablecloths. She'd even created a wedding website with a FAQ section that included dress code guidelines and parking instructions. The ceremony was at St. Mary's downtown, followed by a reception at the Riverside Club. One of those venues that looks like it was designed specifically for Instagram photos, with string lights and exposed brick walls, and the kind of rustic chic aesthetic that makes every guest feel like they're at the most beautiful wedding ever. I've been looking forward to this for months. Not just because I love Lucia and her fiancé Miguel, but because it was going to be the first family event in weeks where I could just be normal Daniel, eating cake and making small talk with relatives without worrying about what fresh hell Clara might unleash next. Sophie had agreed to come as my date, which was both exciting and terrifying. Exciting because I genuinely liked spending time with her, and terrifying because introducing someone to my entire extended family felt like a big step. But she'd insisted she wanted to meet the people who'd helped shape my refreshingly average personality, and honestly, after everything with Clara, being called refreshingly average felt like the highest compliment possible. The ceremony was beautiful. Lucia looked stunning in a dress that probably cost more than my car. Miguel cried during his vows, and my Aunt Maria managed to get through the whole service without loudly commenting on anyone's outfit, which was a minor miracle in itself. Everything was perfect. Too perfect, in hindsight. We were at the reception, about an hour into the cocktail hour, when I first noticed something was off. Sophie and I were talking to my cousin Marco about his new job, and I caught sight of someone in white near the entrance. Not unusual at a wedding. Half the female guests were wearing some shade of white or cream. But this wasn't just any white dress. This was a full-blown, floor-length, beaded wedding dress. The kind with a train and everything. At someone else's wedding. Please tell me I'm hallucinating, Sophie said, following my gaze. But no, I wasn't hallucinating. Standing in the doorway of the Riverside Club, in a dress that probably cost more than most people's cars, was Clara Morrison. She'd crashed my cousin's wedding in full bridal regalia. The conversations around us started to die down as more people noticed the uninvited guest in the inappropriate attire. Lucia's friends were already pulling out their phones, probably texting the bride to warn her that someone had committed the ultimate wedding faux pas. Clara seemed completely oblivious to the stares and whispered conversations. She walked into the reception like she belonged there, scanning the crowd until her eyes landed on me. Then she smiled. Not the crazy smile I'd become accustomed to, but this weird, serene expression that was somehow even more unsettling. "Oh, this is about to be good," Marco muttered, moving closer to us like he was expecting a show. Clara made a beeline for the bar, ordered what looked like a glass of champagne, and then positioned herself strategically near the area where the bouquet toss was supposed to happen later. Because of course she did. The woman had crashed a wedding in a wedding dress and was planning to participate in the bouquet toss. "Should we do something?" Sophie whispered. "Like what?" "She hasn't technically done anything yet," I replied, though every instinct I had was screaming that this was about to go sideways fast. The next hour was a masterclass in awkward tension. Clara mingled with the other guests, introducing herself as my former partner and making vague comments about how weddings were such inspiration for people who believe in true love. She complimented the centerpieces, sampled the hors d'oeuvres, and generally behaved like any other wedding guest, except for the whole wearing a wedding dress to someone else's wedding thing. My relatives kept shooting me confused looks. My Aunt Carmen pulled me aside and asked, "Daniel, why is your ex-novia here in a wedding dress?" I had no good answer for that question. Things reached critical mass during the reception dinner. Lucia and Miguel were making their rounds to each table, thanking guests and taking photos. When they reached the table where Clara had somehow seated herself, I watched from across the room as Clara stood up, gave Lucia a hug, and said something that made my cousin's smile freeze on her face. "What do you think she said?" Sophie asked. "Probably something about how marriage is about compromise and personal growth," I guessed. We found out later that Clara had congratulated Lucia on finding someone willing to accept her exactly as she is and suggested that not all of us are so lucky. She'd basically used my cousin's wedding reception to take passive-aggressive shots at me. But the real showstopper came during the bouquet toss. Lucia gathered all the single women on the dance floor for the traditional bouquet throwing ceremony. It's usually a fun, light-hearted moment where a bunch of women half-heartedly reach for flowers while everyone laughs and takes pictures. Clara positioned herself front and center, still in her full wedding regalia, looking like she was preparing for the Olympics of flower catching. The other women, mostly Lucia's single friends and younger cousins, gave her a wide berth, probably sensing that this woman was operating on a different level of desperation than the rest of them. Lucia turned her back to the crowd and threw the bouquet over her shoulder. It was a perfect throw, aimed toward the middle of the group where Lucia's friend Jessica was standing. Clara lunged for it like her life depended on catching those flowers. Not just lunged. She literally dove, elbowing aside two teenagers and nearly taking out Jessica in the process. She caught the bouquet with both hands and landed on the floor in a tangle of white dress and determination. The entire reception went silent except for the sound of Clara's wedding dress tearing as she struggled to get back to her feet. Did she just tackle someone for the bouquet? Sophie whispered. The answer was yes. Yes, she had. Clara stood up, holding the slightly crushed bouquet like it was a trophy, and looked directly at me with this triumphant expression that suggested she'd just won some kind of cosmic victory. That's when she made her move toward the DJ booth. "Oh no," Marco said. "Oh, this is not happening." But it was happening. Clara had somehow convinced the DJ to give her the microphone, probably by claiming she was giving a toast or something. Before anyone could stop her, her voice was echoing through the reception hall. "Hi everyone," she said, her voice unnaturally bright. "I know I'm not officially part of tonight's celebration, but I just wanted to share some thoughts about true love and what it means to fight for someone you care about." The entire reception turned to stare at her, then at me, then back at her. Lucia looked mortified. Miguel was trying to figure out who this woman was and why she was hijacking his wedding reception. "Love isn't always easy," Clara continued, staring directly at me while she spoke into the microphone. "Sometimes it requires patience. Sometimes it requires compromise. And sometimes it requires helping someone become the best version of themselves, even when they resist that growth." She was giving a speech about our relationship. At my cousin's wedding, while wearing a wedding dress and holding the bouquet she'd just tackled someone to catch. "But true love conquers all obstacles," she said, her voice getting louder and more emotional. "And I believe that when two people are meant to be together, the universe will find a way to." That's when my Aunt Carmen had apparently heard enough. All 5 feet of her marched over to the DJ booth, took the microphone from Clara's hand, and said, "Honey, you need to take off that dress and leave. Right now." "I'm just expressing," Clara started. "You're making a fool of yourself," Aunt Carmen interrupted. "This is not your wedding, that is not your man, and you look desperate. Vámonos." The beautiful thing about Aunt Carmen is that she's spent 40 years dealing with difficult people at her job in social services, so she has zero patience for drama. She physically escorted Clara away from the microphone while my cousin Marco called security. But Clara wasn't done. As security approached, she started shouting across the reception hall, "Daniel, you can't run from this forever. We have something special, and you know it." "Ma'am, you need to leave," the security guard said, taking her gently but firmly by the arm. "This is harassment," Clara yelled as they led her toward the exit. "I'm calling my lawyer. You can't force someone to leave a public event. It's a private wedding, lady," the security guard replied with the patience of someone who'd dealt with drunk wedding guests before. As Clara was being escorted out, still clutching the bouquet and threatening legal action, she called out one final message. "I'm not giving up on us, Daniel. Love means never giving up." And then she was gone, leaving behind a reception full of confused relatives and what would probably become the most legendary family wedding story of all time. The rest of the evening was actually wonderful. Lucia and Miguel laughed about it once they realized who Clara was and why she'd crashed their wedding. The story became an instant hit with the other guests, and by the end of the night, people were toasting to love that doesn't tackle people for bouquets. Sophie spent the drive home alternating between laughter and disbelief. "Your ex-girlfriend crashed a wedding in a wedding dress to give a speech about your relationship," she said. "I mean, I've heard of bold moves, but that's just..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "Completely insane," I suggested. I was going to say worthy of its own reality show, but yeah, completely insane works too. 2 days later, I had a restraining order. Not because I was scared of Clara. Honestly, at this point her antics were more entertaining than threatening, but because Judge Patricia Hernandez, no relation, took one look at the evidence, the laminated list, screenshots of the fake dating profile, the invoice to my mother, and witness statements from the wedding, and decided that Clara Morrison needed legal boundaries. The restraining order was for 2 years and covered all forms of contact, including through third parties. Clara was officially legally required to leave me alone. For the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe again. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my perfectly average apartment, wearing a graphic t-shirt that Clara would have burned in a ceremonial fire, drinking coffee from my Darth Vader mug, and realizing that sometimes the best revenge is just living well. Or in my case, living adequately and being absolutely fine with that. The restraining order worked like a charm. Turns out, having a judge officially tell someone to leave you alone is surprisingly effective at getting them to actually leave you alone. Who could have predicted that? Clara Morrison, professional life optimizer and part-time wedding crasher, finally got the message that her services were neither needed nor wanted. The immediate aftermath was blissfully quiet. No more PowerPoint presentations at my office. No more fake dating profiles using my photos to catfish unsuspecting women. No more invoices for relationship services I never requested. No more surprise visits from hired movers or bogus therapists. Just blessed, beautiful silence. Well, mostly silence. The story of Clara's wedding dress stunt had spread through my family faster than gossip at a high school reunion. Every family gathering for the next 3 months involved someone asking me to retell the story of how my ex-girlfriend crashed Lucia's wedding and tackled teenagers for the bouquet. It became the go-to entertainment at Sunday dinners, barbecues, and random Tuesday phone calls. Tell them about the part where she gave the speech, my mom would say, grinning like she was introducing her favorite comedy special. The wedding photographer had actually caught the entire bouquet tackle sequence on camera, and the pictures became legendary in our family. There's one shot of Clara mid-dive, wedding dress flying, with this look of absolute determination on her face that perfectly captures her entire approach to our relationship. Lucia had it printed and framed as a gag gift for my birthday. But the real vindication came about 2 months after the restraining order, when Edward Morrison called me. Yeah, Clara's dad. The same guy who tried to bribe me back into his daughter's life with a construction job and golf lessons. Daniel, he said, and his voice sounded tired in a way I'd never heard before. I owe you an apology. Turns out, Clara had been lying to her parents about pretty much everything. She'd told them we were still working through our issues, and that the restraining order was just a temporary misunderstanding. She'd been using their money to fund her life optimization business, while telling them I was secretly attending couples therapy and making progress on her improvement list. She showed us the invoice she sent your mother, Edward continued, and I could hear what sounded like embarrassed laughter in his voice. Sarah and we had no idea how far this had gone. We thought she was just having a hard time with the breakup. Clara's mom had apparently found the fake dating profile when she was helping Clara reorganize her social media presence and realized the full scope of what her daughter had been up to. The wedding crash was the final straw. We're getting her professional help, Edward said. Real help, not the kind she was pretending to give you. I felt a little bad for them. Edward and Sarah Morrison weren't bad people. They just raised a daughter who thought the world should conform to her specifications and had the money to enable that delusion for way too long. For what it's worth, Edward added, you handled this whole situation with more class than she deserved. And your mother's response to that invoice was... He paused. Well, Sarah laughed for about 10 minutes straight when she read it. Maya, Clara's sister, had also reached out to apologize and give me updates on Clara's mandatory therapy progress. Apparently, Dr. Elizabeth Chun, the same therapist Clara had tried to ambush me with, was now working with Clara on understanding boundaries and accepting rejection. The irony was almost too perfect. She's making progress, Maya had texted me recently, but she still asks the therapist if there are ways to optimize the therapeutic process for better results. Some people never change. Meanwhile, my life had settled into a rhythm that Clara would have found absolutely horrifying in its ordinariness. I was still working the same project coordinator job, still driving my reliable Honda Civic, still living in my decent apartment in my decent neighborhood. I hadn't joined CrossFit or taken golf lessons or bought a house in Westfield Estates. What I had done was continue dating Sophie, who turned out to be even more awesome than that first Chinese food dinner had suggested. She laughed at my jokes, tolerated my friends' gaming nights, and thought my mom was the coolest person she'd ever met. She also had her own life, her own interests, and zero interest in optimizing my potential or creating improvement plans for my personality. You know what I love about you, she'd said one night while we were watching Netflix and eating pizza. 2 activities that would have horrified Clara. My devastating good looks and sparkling wit. Your complete lack of ambition to be anyone other than exactly who you are. Best compliment I'd ever received. The guys had thrown me a liberation party about a month after the restraining order was finalized. Jordan, Marcus, and Leo had shown up with cheap beer, expensive whiskey, and a custom-made bumper sticker that read mediocre and proud in bold letters. I'd actually put it on my Civic, partly as a joke and partly as a genuine declaration of independence from anyone who thought I needed improving. To Daniel, Marcus had said, raising his beer, who chose happiness over a BMW. Insanity over salary optimization, Leo added. And real friends over golf lessons, Jordan finished. We'd toasted to adequacy, mediocrity, and the revolutionary concept of being satisfied with a good life instead of constantly chasing someone else's definition of a perfect one. My coworkers had eventually stopped bringing up Clara's office PowerPoint presentation, though someone had saved screenshots and they still occasionally surfaced in the company Slack channel whenever anyone needed a good laugh. Greg had actually used the incident as a cautionary tale during a meeting about workplace boundaries, though he was careful not to mention names. Sometimes, he'd said, people in our personal lives don't understand professional environments. It's important to maintain clear boundaries between work and relationships. Everyone had nodded seriously while trying not to look at me. The fake LinkedIn article had become something of an internet legend. Someone had created a parody account called Relationship Optimization Consultant that still posted weekly content about upward dating and partner improvement strategies. It had over 50,000 followers and a waiting list for consulting services that didn't actually exist. Clara had deleted all her social media accounts after the wedding incident, but the screenshots lived on forever, a permanent reminder that the internet never forgets and karma has a wicked sense of humor. My mom had framed Clara's invoice and hung it in her kitchen next to her nursing school diploma and a picture of me at my college graduation. My two favorite achievements, she'd joke when people asked about it. Raising a good son and shutting down someone who tried to bill me for it. The invoice had become something of a conversation starter at Mom's hospital. Apparently, the story of the woman who tried to charge someone's mother for dating their son had made the rounds through the entire nursing staff, and Mom had been asked to retell it at 3 different retirement parties. $24,000. She'd always end the story, shaking her head. That girl thought she was worth $24,000 for 3 years of complaining about my son. As I sit here now, 6 months later, I realize Clara actually did me a favor. Not intentionally, obviously. Her goal was to control and manipulate me into becoming someone I wasn't. But by being so completely, utterly unreasonable, she forced me to defend the person I actually am instead of just accepting that maybe I wasn't good enough. She wanted a husband who made more money, drove a better car, had different friends, saw his family less, and basically transformed into someone else entirely. What she got instead was a restraining order and a reputation as the woman who crashed a wedding in a wedding dress to give a speech about relationship optimization. I'm still the same guy I was when she slid that laminated list across the table at Luigi's. Same job, same car, same friends, same mom who I visit every Sunday. The only difference is now I know for certain that this life, this perfectly adequate, wonderfully ordinary life, is exactly what I want. Clara Morrison wanted to optimize me into someone worthy of her love. Turns out, I was already worthy of love from people who actually mattered. And honestly, that's more than good enough for me.